In 1876, the Long Branch Saloon in Dodge City served a meal that would turn your stomach today. The seventh on this list was eaten by W. Wyatt Earp himself, and food historians say it tasted like chewing a boot left in the sun. The 14th was so dangerous to prepare that cooks lost fingers making it. The third, the dish that outlaws and lawmen actually agreed on, was something your grandmother would recognize instantly, even if the recipe would shock her. Here is what the dime novels never told you. The Wild West was not just gunfights and gambling. It was hunger. Real, grinding, bone-deep hunger that made men eat things no Hollywood script would dare put on screen. Because here is the truth. When Jesse James rode into a Kansas saloon after 3 weeks on the trail, he was not ordering a steak. He was eating whatever was on that free lunch counter, the same as the sheriff who would eventually come looking for him. These 25 meals shaped the West as much as any six-shooter. Let us count them down. Number 25, hardtack and whiskey gravy. Hardtack with bacon fat and whiskey. Before a cowboy ever reached a saloon, he survived on hardtack. Those pale square crackers, about 3 inches across, were baked so hard they broke teeth and had to be soaked before swallowing. Army surplus hardtack flooded the frontier after the Civil War, selling for pennies a pound at trading posts. A single biscuit could sit in a saddlebag for years without spoiling, because there was simply nothing in it for bacteria to eat. The saloon version took this miserable staple and transformed it. Bartenders and cooks crumbled hardtack into pans of rendered bacon fat, poured in cheap rot-gut whiskey instead of milk, and stirred until the whole mess turned into a pale, alcoholic paste. Men ate it standing at the bar, scraping the pan with their knives. It cost almost nothing. It soaked up liquor, and after a month on the trail eating nothing but saddle jerky, it tasted like paradise. Number 24, pickled eggs. Every saloon in the American West kept a large glass jar sitting at the end of the bar. Inside floated pale, ghostly eggs bobbing in a brine of vinegar, salt, and beet juice. These were pickled eggs, and they were the original free bar snack, placed there deliberately to make customers thirsty, so they would keep buying drinks. The eggs came from local farms, boiled hard and submerged in brine for at least 2 weeks. The vinegar turned the whites rubbery and the yolks green at the edges. The taste was sharp, sulfurous, and deeply savory. Cowboys ate them by the handful because they were free, and free mattered when a man was nursing his last nickel. A jar held about 40 eggs. On a busy Saturday night in Abilene, the whole jar was gone by midnight. Number 23, son of a gun stew. Do not let the polite name fool you. The cowboys called it something considerably less printable, and the name told you exactly what was in it. When a calf was slaughtered on the trail, the chuck wagon cook used every single part of the animal: heart, liver, tongue, kidneys, sweetbread, and the marrow gut. The tube connecting the two stomachs were all thrown into a single, enormous iron pot with wild onions, whatever peppers could be found, and enough water to cover the lot. The marrow gut gave the stew its distinctive richness, almost creamy in texture, because it was packed with partially digested milk from young calves. Trail hands considered this the finest stew on the frontier. When cowboys finally reached a saloon in Dodge City or Abilene, some demanded the cook make a version. A few saloons actually put it on the menu. Those that did were packed every night. Number 22, spotted pup. Here is the first surprise on this list. The toughest men in the West, the drovers who pushed longhorn cattle 1,000 miles across open prairie, had a weakness. They craved rice pudding. They just would not call it that. Spotted pup was sourdough rice cooked slowly in a Dutch oven with raisins stirred in, the dark raisins scattered through the white rice, giving the dish its name. Chuck wagon cooks made it with whatever sweetener they had, sometimes cane sugar, sometimes sorghum molasses, occasionally nothing but the natural sweetness of the raisins themselves. Saloons that offered spotted pup as a dessert could charge a full dime for a bowl, twice the price of most dishes on the menu. Cowboys ate it in complete silence, which was the highest possible compliment on the frontier. Number 21. Canned peaches. The first transcontinental railroad changed what Americans ate forever. By 1870, canned goods manufactured in Baltimore and San Francisco were reaching saloons and trading posts across Kansas, Texas, and New Mexico. And nothing, not whiskey, not steak, nothing was more prized in a frontier saloon than a can of peaches. The syrup was thick and sweet, almost alcoholic in its intensity after months of dried beans and salt pork. Men paid 50 cents for a can, a full day's wages for a cowhand, and ate the peaches with their fingers right out of the tin. They then drank the syrup from the can like it was a fine wine. Court records from Abilene in 1872 document at least 2 fistfights that started over the last can of peaches on a saloon shelf. Food historians have found this pattern repeated across the frontier. A tin of peaches was not a luxury. It was a lifeline. Number 20. Prairie dog. Eat what you can catch. That was the iron law of the frontier, and prairie dogs were everywhere. An acre of Kansas grassland might hold 100 of them. Buffalo hunters and outlaws hiding from posses in open country learned quickly that prairie dog tasted remarkably close to chicken, particularly when you were hungry enough. The preparation was crude but effective. Skin the animal, gut it, skewer it on a stick, and hold it over a fire until the fat rendered out and the skin crisped. Saloon cooks who found themselves short of proper meat roasted them in large batches, chopped the meat fine, and stretched it through stews and pies. Doc Holliday reportedly ate prairie dog stew somewhere outside of Tombstone in the winter of 1880. He was known to have complained it needed more salt. Number 19. Buffalo tongue. First pattern break. Here is where the Wild West diet becomes genuinely disturbing. In 1870, the United States was home to an estimated 30 million buffalo. By 1890, fewer than 1,000 remained. The hunters who accomplished this near extinction were not primarily after hides. They were after tongues. Buffalo tongue was considered the greatest delicacy of the American frontier. A single tongue, smoked, salted, and packed in brine, sold in St. Louis or Chicago restaurants for more than $1, at a time when a cowboy earned $30 a month. Saloon kitchens in Wichita and Abilene served roasted buffalo tongue sliced thin with mustard and pickled vegetables. The meat was rich, deeply marbled, and more tender than any other cut on the animal. Wyatt Earp, who worked as a buffalo hunter before he became a lawman, stated in his memoirs that tongue was the finest meat he ever tasted. Millions of animals were slaughtered specifically so the rest of us could agree with him. Number 18. Mulligan stew. Every saloon had a pot on the back of the stove that never entirely emptied. This was the mulligan, a perpetual stew made from whatever came through the door: bones from the previous night's roast, vegetable trimmings, leftover beans, and the occasional piece of game brought in by a hunter looking to trade food for drink. Nothing went in the garbage. Everything went in the pot. The mulligan was the free lunch counter's main attraction. Under the Free Lunch Act, an informal understanding that operated across the frontier, any man who bought a drink was entitled to eat from the counter. The mulligan was always there, always hot, and always mysterious. A bowl contained layers of the week's history in every spoonful. Lawmen and outlaws alike ate from the same pot. Jesse James is documented eating at saloon lunch counters in Missouri on multiple occasions. The sheriff may have been sitting 3 stools down. Number 17. Tamales. In Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona, the food culture was not English or Irish. It was Mexican, and nowhere was this more visible than at the saloon kitchen. Tamales, masa dough, packed around spiced pork or beef, and steamed in corn husks, were sold at the saloon counter for a penny apiece. A hungry man could eat 10 for a dime. Female vendors, many of them Mexican or Tejana women, sold tamales from baskets outside saloon doors, sometimes pushing carts through the saloon itself. Billy the Kid grew up eating tamales in the silver mining towns of New Mexico. Pat Garrett, the sheriff who eventually tracked him down, almost certainly ate from the same vendors. Tamales were food that crossed every line in the West: racial, legal, economic. The husks got dropped on saloon floors and swept out with a sawdust at closing time. Number 16. Vinegar pie. Second pattern break. When you have no lemons, no fresh fruit of any kind, and you still need to make a pie that will not kill your customers, you make vinegar pie. This sounds like a punishment. It was actually a triumph of frontier ingenuity. The filling combined eggs, sugar, butter, and cider vinegar in proportions that balanced sharp against sweet. Baked in a short crust pastry, the result set firm and golden, tasting startlingly similar to lemon curd, the vinegar mimicking citrus acid in every way. Saloon cooks across Kansas and Missouri kept this in their repertoire through the 1870s and 1880s. The ingredients were cheap, stable, and available year-round. Cowboys who ate it for the first time genuinely could not identify the key ingredient. Saloon owners who revealed the recipe were sometimes accused of serving prison food. The ones who stayed quiet kept their customers coming back for more. Number 15. Pinto beans. A pound cost 3 cents in 1875, and it fed 5 grown men. Saloon cooks soaked them overnight, simmered them for hours with salt pork and dried chili peppers, and served them with cornbread. The beans absorbed everything in that pot until each one carried an intensity of flavor that took all day to build. On the free lunch counter, a bowl of beans kept men from drinking on an empty stomach. That was both charitable and entirely commercial. Number 14. Bear meat. A single grizzly weighed 800 pounds and fed a saloon for 3 days. The problem was that hunting one required either extraordinary marksmanship or extraordinary recklessness, and sometimes both. Mountain men sold grizzly to saloons for 20 cents a pound, when beef was 8 cents a pound. The fat was arguably more valuable than the meat. It was used for cooking, leather preservation, rifle maintenance, and in at least one documented case, hair tonic. Every saloon cook kept a sourdough starter, treated with more care than most of the saloon's human occupants. Baked in a Dutch oven, the biscuits came out golden outside, hollow inside, with a sour tang that cut through the heaviness of everything else on the plate. A cook who could turn out 100 perfect biscuits before 6 in the morning was more valuable than a good bartender. Both Bat Masterson and Wild Bill Hickok had strong opinions about biscuit quality. The biscuits generally won the argument. Number 12. Chili con carne. Third pattern break. The debate about who invented chili is the longest-running food argument in American history, and it almost certainly started in a saloon. The frontier version bore no resemblance to modern canned chili. Dried beef, not fresh. Chili paste ground on a metate stone, not powder. Dark, brick red, intensely flavored, almost completely dry. No tomatoes, no beans. Beans were added later and immediately caused a controversy that continues to this day. The Texas state legislature has officially weighed in. They were not joking. A skilled hunter could take a deer within a few miles of any frontier town, which meant venison showed up on saloon menus year-round. The meat was lean, so saloon cooks cut the back strap thick, pounded it flat, and fried it fast in rendered lard, then deglazed the pan with cheap whiskey and onions. Cowboys, accustomed to trail jerky, ate it with visible emotion. Outlaws on the run specifically sought out saloons, known to serve fresh game. A man cannot ride hard on 3 days of beef jerky and raw fear alone. Number 10. Oysters. The most surprising item on this list by a considerable distance. In the 1870s, raw oysters were being eaten in saloons in Abilene, Dodge City, and Tombstone, hundreds of miles from any ocean. The railroad made it possible. Freshly shucked oysters packed in ice arrived from Baltimore within 3 days. Saloons charged $1 for a dozen when whiskey was a nickel. A single oyster shipment in Abilene sold out in 4 hours. Men who had been on the trail for months went almost irrational in the presence of cold, briny oysters. Wyatt Earp's Dodge City had at least 2 oyster saloons running simultaneously. Number 9. Liver and onions, 4th pattern break. The meal lawmen and outlaws ate more than any other, and the reason tells you something true about the frontier. Beef liver cost almost nothing because nobody wanted it. Saloon cooks fried it fast in cast iron with caramelized onions until the outside turned dark and the inside stayed tender. Get it wrong, and it turned to leather. Get it right, and it was one of the finest meals on the frontier for 15 cents. Pat Garrett ate liver and onions. So did John Wesley Hardin, who reportedly killed 42 men. They may have eaten it in the same saloon on different nights. That is the Wild West nobody films. Number 8. Rattlesnake. On the plains of Texas and New Mexico, a rattlesnake crossing your path was not a threat. It was lunch. Skinned, gutted, roasted over coals until the exterior charred slightly. The taste was mild, genuinely similar to white meat chicken. Saloons in border territories offered it as a novelty, and Eastern tourists on the Transcontinental Railroad paid premium prices for the story. Cowboys who ate rattlesnake out of necessity were uniformly unimpressed by people who ate it for entertainment. The snake did not notice the difference either way. Number 7. Cornbread. Not one saloon in the history of the frontier did not make cornbread. It was baked in cast iron skillets, in Dutch ovens, and in fireplace-baked kettles. The frontier version was not sweet. The basic ingredients were stone-ground cornmeal, lard, salt, and water. It was dense and slightly gritty, powerful enough in flavor that it made plain water taste like something. Men packed it in their coat pockets when they left the saloon. For many of them, it was the last thing they ate before they rode out and did not come back. Number 6. Steak. At the end of a 3-month cattle drive, cowboys had money and wanted steak. Not every saloon could deliver one worth eating. Longhorn beef was lean and tough from thousands of miles of walking. The best cooks aged it in a cold back room, then cooked it over mesquite wood, which burned hotter than anything else and left a smokiness that became the defining flavor of Texas beef. A proper saloon steak in Dodge City in 1875 cost 50 cents. That was 2% of a cowboy's entire monthly salary, and they paid it without hesitation. Number 5. Salt pork and gravy. The most democratizing food in the American West was not the Colt revolver. It was salt pork. Outlaws carried it in their saddlebags. Army quartermasters ordered it by the ton. Saloon cooks sliced it thick, fried it until the edges crisped, made a roux in the rendered fat, and poured the gravy over biscuits, cornbread, or potatoes. Period diaries from the Kansas frontier mention this dish more than any other single meal. It shows up in the recorded last meals of at least 3 condemned outlaws. They knew what they were doing. Number 4. Bread pudding. Every saloon had stale bread because frontier air dried it within a day. The solution was bread pudding. Sourdough torn and soaked in eggs, whiskey, sugar, and dried fruit. Baked in a Dutch oven with a whiskey butter sauce pooling in the corners. It cost almost nothing. Diners who had eaten bread pudding in New Orleans said the frontier versions were comparable when the whiskey sauce was good. Saloons were not likely to be stingy with the whiskey. Number 3. Buffalo hump roast. The meal that Wyatt Earp and the men he was hunting would both have agreed was the greatest thing on the frontier. The hump above the buffalo's shoulders was packed with fat and connective tissue that broke down over 8 hours of roasting into something more tender and more intensely flavored than any domestic beef. The smell reached the street and brought men in from 3 blocks away. Court records from Tombstone in 1881 document 2 men fined for fighting over the last portion. The judge found in favor of the hungrier-looking plaintiff. Not the components separately, the combination. Picture a bowl of pinto beans, salt pork floating in the liquid, a wedge of cornbread on the side, and a tin cup of black coffee perched above the bowl. This showed up in saloon ledgers from Dodge City to Tombstone more than any steak, any roast, any game on the menu. It cost a nickel. A cowboy who lost everything at cards could still afford it. A sheriff running on no sleep could eat it in 4 minutes, standing at the bar. Men wrote home about the beans. They mentioned specific saloons by name in letters to their mothers. Number 1. Chuckwagon chili and biscuits. Everything on this list tells part of the story. This one tells all of it. Cowboys who had lived for weeks on trail. Chili and sourdough biscuits walked into every saloon carrying the memory of that food in their bodies. Every other meal was measured against it. No tomatoes, no beans, no concessions to anything that could not survive in a saddlebag in August. When those cowboys finally sat down and ordered food, the cooks who understood the West made it exactly the same way. No embellishment, no improvement. Outlaws ordered it. Sheriffs ordered it. Buffalo hunters and railroad workers and gamblers and circuit judges ordered it. The West did not have much in common across all its different kinds of people, but they all ate the same chili. Drop in the comments which of these you would actually try today. I suspect some of them are still being made in somebody's kitchen right now, and that is exactly how it should be.